Is the wildest reaction you have seen to someone getting fired? 1. One day I was unexpectedly fired. A woman from HR showed up at my cubicle and asked me to come to her office. When I got there, the company president was waiting and told me that I was not a team player, so they were letting me go. He then told the HR woman to stay with me as I packed my stuff and left. So as we walk back to my cubicle, people ask what's up, and I tell them I was just fired. Well, bad news spread at the speed of bad news, so just as I started packing, people started dropping by or called me and asked me to stop by and help them with their problems before I left. Where do we store this? How did you solve that? How should I attack this problem? And so forth. And to each, I said, sure, why not? I don't have any plans for today. So for a couple of hours, much to her chagrin, the woman from HR followed me around as I helped out this person and that. Finally, a couple of the guys took me out to lunch, and from there I went home. It is a small industrial community on Cape Cod with many small companies. And over the years I have worked with many of the same people under different company names and titles. But I have never worked for that company president or that HR woman since. 2. My boss fired W. Very popular employee for a made-up offense. 15 minutes later the entire shift walked off, leaving the boss alone to cover the retail store himself. The district manager called 2 employees in from every area store to keep the store open, and the regional manager got involved. It took a week, but we were all hired back at a 10% raise. 3. When I was a workers rep in the chocolate factory, I was asked to represent a young lad being fired for refusing a reasonable instruction and walking off the job. I interviewed him and he told me about the incident. I just said, if what you're telling me is true, you have nothing to worry about. We went into the disciplinary and the department manager asked the shift supervisor to describe the incident. The lad had arrived late for the start of the shift. He'd been ordered to clean and sweep the floors around a large machine. There had been a breakdown on the previous shift which had caused a large spillage, including oil on the floor. The lad had refused and asked for other work to avoid getting his shoes dirty. The supervisor had ordered him to do the job again and the lad had asked for other work. The supervisor had no other job to offer and the lad went home. Clear case. Dismiss. I asked the supervisor to go over the situation again and then stopped him at the point the lad had gone home. I said, what did you actually say to him? He said, I told him you can either do that bloody cleaning or go home, and which of the options you gave him did he take? I asked. At which point the department manager actually said, FFS, you can't say that was giving an instruction to leave the job. We then had an adjournment. We could hear the laughter outside the room while we waited. Then they decided to rescind the dismissal. Naturally, I asked about pay for the shift, which was granted reluctantly. The department manager did speak to me later and told me I owed him one. 4. Back in the 1980s I worked in a retail store. The owner had hired a younger guy named Jim. Jim was a very lazy mama's boy. A few examples: he went home for lunch one day in wintertime and got his car stuck in a snowbank. Instead of waiting for someone to come pull him out, he spun his tires until they started to smoke. He held his foot on the accelerator at 120 miles per hour until the tires exploded. When he got back to work he told us about what had happened and laughed about it. He wasn't worried because his mother was buying him new tires. Jim was a little loud. If he thought a woman had a large chest, he'd loudly comment about it to other employees. Those customers heard his commenting and complained to the owner. One afternoon I noticed customers walking part way down and then turning around to go the other way. Thinking that something got left in the aisle and was blocking the way, I went to investigate. There was Jim, laying on his side on the floor across the entire aisle, resting his head on his hand, pulling items out of a box one at a time, placing a price sticker on it, then putting it on the shelf. I went into the owner's office and suggested he take a stroll down the aisle Jim was working in, which he did. The boss didn't yell and scream but did inform Jim that what he was doing was unacceptable. Jim went into the basement stock room and was yelling, throwing things and having a temper tantrum. The owner heard things banging around downstairs and slowly crept down the stairs. He stood there for a good 5 minutes while Jim was ranting and raving about how the owner was treating him like a little kid and saying other pretty horrible things about him. Jim finally became aware that someone was standing there watching him throw his tantrum. The owner pointed to the back door and simply said out. Never saw Jim again. Spoiled brat, 25-year-old mama's boy. 5. They were laid off, not fired for cause. Just to be clear, our company merged with another company, and they needed to have mass layoffs. There were 2 people in our group who had been with the company for over 25 years, and were entitled to full retirement benefits, including defined benefit pensions, dental, medical and 2 years severance. One had come close to retiring just before the merger, but decided to stay on until his wife retired in a year, then stayed on after the merger, hoping to be laid off. The other was past retirement age, but kept working to support her disabled granddaughter. We were told to stay in our office in the morning, because the manager would be around to hand out our packages to those of us who were let go. They started laying off people at the other end of the hallway, and I could tell what happened, as these 2 people, who seldom spoke to each other, came dancing down the hallway together. They waved to me as they passed. They were both over 65, and I didn't recognize the dance, without any music, but I think it might have been a polka.